The faded sepia photograph sits on Professor Eleanor Morgan's desk, its edges worn and cracked with age. The year 1907 is written in faint ink on the back, alongside the words, "Children at Play, Summer." She adjusts her glasses, leaning closer to examine the 5 children frozen in time, their faces caught between laughter and motion on that distant summer day. A large Victorian house looms in the background, its windows like dark, watchful eyes. Eleanor's office at the university's Department of Historical Photography is bathed in the soft glow of her desk lamp, the only light burning at this late hour. Outside, the campus is quiet, covered in the thick blanket of night. She shouldn't be here this late, but something about this photograph keeps drawing her back, something she can't quite place. The university acquired the collection last month, a treasure trove of early 20th century photography from the estate of Herbert Phillips, a once renowned photographer who documented everyday American life. Most of the collection had been catalogued, but this particular photograph had been separated from the rest, found tucked inside an envelope marked only with a curious symbol, a circle bisected by a vertical line. Eleanor's voice carries through the empty room as she dictates notes into her recorder. Phillips collection, item 237, gelatin silver print, approximately 8 by 10 inches. Summer 1907, based on inscription and clothing styles. 5 children playing in what appears to be the side yard of a large Victorian home, likely in New England based on the architectural style. The children are wearing typical attire of the period, the boys in knickerbockers and caps, the girls in pinafores with hair ribbons. She pauses, studying the composition. Her finger traces the outline of the house, the elaborate gingerbread trim typical of the period, the wide porch with its ornate railings. The 5 children are arranged in a loose circle in the foreground, caught in what appears to be a game of tag or ring around the rosy. Their faces are slightly blurred, a common issue with photographs of the time, given the longer exposure required. The quality is remarkable for the period, she continues. Phillips was clearly skilled at capturing movement, though the children's faces show the expected motion blur from the exposure time. Eleanor reaches for her magnifying glass, running it carefully over the image. There's something about the photograph that doesn't sit right with her, something in the composition that feels deliberate. Phillips was known for his naturalistic style, for capturing genuine moments rather than posed scenes. But there's a formality to this arrangement that seems calculated. The children stand in an almost perfect circle, their positioning too precise to be entirely spontaneous, and there's a strange intensity to their postures, despite the blurred faces. They aren't looking at each other as children at play normally would. Instead, they seem to be looking outward, away from their circle. A chill runs up Eleanor's spine as she notices something she hadn't before. The children aren't holding hands, as she'd initially assumed. Their arms are extended outward, like spokes on a wheel, almost as if they're reaching for something, or someone. Her magnifying glass moves to the background, to the house that dominates the upper portion of the frame. The windows are dark, as one would expect in a daytime photograph. All except one, a small attic window at the very top. There, a curious white shape is visible. It could be a curtain or a reflection, but it has a distinct form, almost like a face. Note peculiar light anomaly in attic window, she murmurs into the recorder. Possible reflection or processing artifact. Eleanor sets down the magnifying glass and rubs her eyes. It's past midnight, and she's been staring at photographs all day. Her vision is tired, her mind prone to seeing patterns where none exist. This is why serious photographic analysis is never done when fatigued. She slips the photograph into its protective sleeve and places it in her drawer. Tomorrow she'll examine it with fresh eyes and the proper equipment. Perhaps she'll ask her colleague Dr. Michaels from the Digital Enhancement Lab to take a look. He has tools that can bring out details invisible to the naked eye. As Eleanor gathers her things to leave, her phone vibrates on the desk. It's a text from James, her research assistant. Found records on the Phillips, summer of 1907. You won't believe what happened to him that August. Call me tomorrow. Eleanor frowns at the cryptic message. James has been helping her research Phillips's life and career, digging through archives while she focuses on the photographs themselves. What could he have found that couldn't wait until morning? She considers calling him now, but a glance at the clock changes her mind. It's too late, and whatever James discovered will still be there in the morning. She sends a quick reply promising to call first thing, then switches off her desk lamp. As darkness envelops the room, Eleanor can't shake the feeling that she's being watched. She turns back to her desk, to the drawer where the photograph now rests. It's just her imagination. she tells herself. Just the natural unease that comes from spending too many hours alone with the fragments of forgotten lives. She closes her office door and walks down the empty corridor, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Behind her, in the darkness of the drawer, 5 children stand frozen in their circle, arms outstretched, reaching through time. Morning light streams through the windows of the university cafeteria as Eleanor stirs her coffee. Watching the small whirlpool form in the center of her cup, she didn't sleep well. Dreams of children playing in circles, of white faces pressed against attic windows, had turned her night into a restless blur. "You look terrible," says a familiar voice. Eleanor looks up to see James sliding into the chair across from her, his own coffee in hand. At 26, he's one of her most promising graduate students. Enthusiastic, meticulous, and blessed with the kind of intuitive understanding of historical context that can't be taught. "Good morning to you too," she replies with a tired smile. "Now, what was so important that you had to text me at midnight?" James sets a manila folder on the table between them. "Herbert Phillips," he says, his voice low with excitement. "I found his personal journals in the university archives. They were misclassified, filed under literary collections rather than photographic ones. No one's looked at them in decades." Eleanor's fatigue vanishes as she reaches for the folder. "His journals? That's incredible, James. We could finally get some context for these photographs." "Oh, there's context, all right," James says, leaning forward. "But it's not what you'd expect. Phillips wasn't just documenting everyday life. He was documenting what he called the thin places." "Thin places?" Eleanor frowns. "What does that mean?" James taps the folder. "It's an old Celtic concept. Places where the boundary between our world and others is thinner, where things can slip through." Phillips became obsessed with the idea after the death of his daughter in 1906. He believed that if he could find these thin places and capture them on film, he might see her again. Eleanor feels that same chill from the previous night. "Are you saying Phillips was photographing what he thought were haunted locations?" "Not exactly haunted, more like permeable." James pulls out a photocopied page from the folder, Phillips's handwriting flowing across it in faded ink. He writes about how children are more sensitive to these boundaries, how they can perceive what adults cannot. He started seeking out places with histories of strange occurrences, then photographing the children who lived there. Eleanor thinks of the 5 children in the photograph, their arms outstretched toward some unseen presence. "The New England house," she murmurs. "The one in the photograph I showed you yesterday." James nods. "The Blackwood estate in Arkham, Massachusetts. Phillips visited in August 1907. He was particularly interested in that house because of reports of children who played strange games in the yard, games they claimed were taught to them by the white lady in the attic." Eleanor's coffee grows cold as James continues, detailing Phillips's descent into what could only be described as obsession. After the death of his 8-year-old daughter Emily from scarlet fever, the once pragmatic photographer had turned to spiritualism, then to older, more obscure beliefs about the nature of death and what might lie beyond. The last entry in his journal is dated August 17, 1907, James says, sliding another photocopied page across the table. It just says, "I found her. Emily was right about the circle. God help me, she was right about everything." "And after that?" Eleanor asks, though she suspects she already knows the answer. "Nothing. No more entries." 3 days later, a groundskeeper found him in the Blackwood attic. He'd hung himself. James hesitates, then adds, "The police report mentioned that he was smiling when they found him, and that despite being dead for at least 48 hours, his body was still warm to the touch." Eleanor sits back, processing this information. "This changes our entire understanding of the collection," she says finally. "These aren't just documentary photographs. They're experiments, attempts to capture something beyond normal perception." "Exactly," James says, his eyes bright with academic excitement. "And that symbol you found on the envelope? I looked it up. It's an old protection sigil, used in folk magic to create boundaries, to keep things in or out." Eleanor thinks of the photograph in her desk drawer, of the 5 children with their outstretched arms, of the strange white shape in the attic window. "I need to take another look at that photograph," she says, rising from her chair. "And I need to talk to Dr. Michaels about digital enhancement." James gathers his materials, stuffing them back into the folder. "There's something else," he says, his voice dropping even lower. "The Blackwood house? It's still standing." "It's been converted into a historical museum. We could go there, see the location for ourselves." Eleanor hesitates. The academic in her is thrilled at the possibility of connecting Phillips's photograph to its physical location. But another part of her, A more primitive part that responds to the prickling of hairs on the back of her neck is reluctant. "Let's see what the enhanced photograph shows us first," she says. "Then we can decide about Arkham." The Dr. Richard Michaels Digital Enhancement Lab is a stark contrast to Eleanor's paper-strewn office. Here, everything is sleek and modern. High-resolution monitors, specialized scanners, and the low hum of powerful computers processing vast amounts of data. "You've brought me something interesting, I hope," Michaels says as Eleanor and James enter. The digital imaging specialist is in his 50s, with the precise movements of someone who has spent decades working with delicate equipment and fragile materials. Eleanor carefully removes the photograph from its protective sleeve. Herbert Phillips, 1907. "There are some anomalies I'd like to examine more closely." Michaels accepts the photograph with gloved hands, examining it briefly before placing it on his scanner. Good condition for its age. Phillips had excellent technique. "That's what makes this so unusual," Eleanor says, explaining what they've learned about Phillips's obsession with thin places and his belief that children could perceive what adults could not. Michaels listens with the neutral expression of someone who has heard many strange theories in his career. "Grief can do peculiar things to a rational mind," he says as the scanner hums to life, especially in an era before modern psychology. The scanned image appears on the main monitor, enlarged and crisp. Even at this basic level of enhancement, new details emerge. The children's faces, though still blurred by movement, show expressions that seem more solemn than playful. The house in the background has a neglected quality. Peeling paint, overgrown bushes along the foundation. "Let me adjust the contrast," Michaels murmurs, his fingers dancing across the keyboard. The image shifts, shadows deepening, highlights becoming more pronounced. Eleanor leans closer to the screen, studying the circle of children. "Can you focus on their hands? I want to see if they're actually reaching for something." Michaels zooms in on the leftmost child, a girl in a pinafore with ribbons in her hair. Her arm is indeed extended, fingers splayed, and there, just visible at the edge of her reach, is a distortion in the air, a subtle warping of the background, as if the light itself is bending. "That's odd," Michaels says, adjusting his glasses. "Could be a processing artifact from the original development, or damage to the emulsion over time. It's present for all 5 children," James points out as Michaels moves from one figure to the next. Each child reaches toward a similar distortion, a ripple in the visual field that forms a larger circle around their own. Eleanor feels a knot forming in her stomach. "Now the attic window, please." Michaels shifts the focus to the top of the house, to the small window where Eleanor had noticed the strange white shape. Under enhancement, it resolves into something more defined, a pale oval that does indeed resemble a face, pressed against the glass from inside. "Just a reflection," Michaels says, though his voice lacks conviction. "Or perhaps a curtain caught in a draft." "Can you increase the definition?" Eleanor asks. Michaels applies additional filters, and the image clarifies further. The white oval takes on features, 2 dark hollows where eyes would be, a shadowy suggestion of a mouth, not quite human in its proportions. The face seems elongated, its edges blurring into the surrounding darkness of the room beyond. "That's not a reflection," James whispers. Michaels clears his throat. "The human brain is designed to see faces even where none exist. It's called pareidolia, especially common when examining ambiguous visual stimuli like this." But Eleanor isn't listening. She's focused on something else now, a detail at the very edge of the photograph that she hadn't noticed before. In the far corner of the yard, partially hidden by a lilac bush, stands another figure, an adult, based on the height. Just the suggestion of a form, really, but unmistakably present. "Can you enhance this section?" she asks, pointing. Michaels zooms in on the area she's indicated. The figure emerges from the shadows, a man in early 20th century attire, a photographer's coat, his face obscured by what appears to be a camera on a tripod. "Phillips," Eleanor says. "He's photographing himself taking the photograph, using a remote shutter or timer." "That doesn't make sense," James says. "How can he be in the photograph if he's the one taking it?" Michaels applies more filters, attempting to bring the figure into sharper focus. As he does, Eleanor notices something that makes her breath catch. The camera the figure is holding isn't pointed at the children. It's pointed directly at the attic window, and there's something wrong with the photographer's stance. He's leaning at an impossible angle, as if suspended. His feet don't quite touch the ground. "Is that?" James begins, then stops. Michaels sees it too. He sits back in his chair, professional skepticism momentarily forgotten. "It looks like he's hanging." he says quietly. Like a suicide, Eleanor finishes. The lab falls silent as the implication sinks in. If the figure in the photograph is indeed Phillips, and if he's depicted as he was found days later, then this photograph shows something that hadn't yet happened when it was taken. Michaels is the first to recover his composure. This is obviously a double exposure, he says firmly. A common technique in early photography, especially among spiritualists trying to create ghostly images. Phillips probably created this as part of his experiments. Eleanor wants to agree. It's the rational explanation, the one that doesn't send shivers down her spine. But something doesn't fit. The journal entries James found indicate Phillips visited the Blackwood house on August 14th. He died on August 17th. This photograph is dated summer 1907 on the back. So he created the double exposure during those 3 days, Michaels says with a shrug, or someone else added it later. The collection was sealed in storage after his death, James counters. His sister had it locked away. No one touched these photographs until the university acquired them last month. Michaels looks from James to Eleanor, then back to the monitor. For a moment his scientific certainty wavers. What exactly are you suggesting? Eleanor stares at the enhanced image, the solemn children forming their circle, arms reaching toward invisible distortions in the air, the pale face in the attic window, and the hanging figure of Herbert Phillips, photographing his own future. I'm suggesting we need to visit Arkham, she says. We need to see the Blackwood house for ourselves. The drive to Arkham takes just over 3 hours, the scenery gradually shifting from urban sprawl to rolling countryside, then to the dense woods that characterize this part of Massachusetts. Eleanor drives while James navigates, occasionally reading aloud from Phillips's journal entries that he's brought along. The children say she's been in the attic for as long as anyone can remember, James reads. They describe her as very tall and very thin, with hair so pale it's almost white. They say she teaches them games, old games that no one else remembers, games with rules that must be followed precisely. Eleanor keeps her eyes on the road, but her mind is filled with images from the enhanced photograph, the children's circle, the face in the window, Phillips hanging in the background. Despite the warmth of the car's heater, she feels cold. What do we actually know about the Blackwood house? She asks, changing the subject. When was it built? Who lived there? James consults his notes. Built in 1823 by Thaddeus Blackwood, a sea captain who made his fortune in the China trade. The family owned it until 1925, when the last Blackwood died without heirs. It sat empty for decades, fell into disrepair. The Arkham Historical Society acquired it in the 1970s and restored it as a museum. Any reports of unusual occurrences, hauntings? James hesitates. Nothing official, but according to Phillips's notes, the locals avoided the place even when the Blackwoods still lived there. There were rumors about the family, strange practices, unexplained disappearances of servants, the usual Gothic melodrama that surrounds old houses. And the children in the photograph? Who were they? Local children, as far as I can tell. Phillips doesn't name them, just refers to them as the circle. Eleanor's hands tighten on the steering wheel. The circle. The same word used in Phillips's final journal entry. Emily was right about the circle. They reach Arkham in the early afternoon. It's a small town, picturesque in that particular New England way. White steepled churches, colonial architecture, maple trees lining the main street. But there's something unwelcoming about it, a closedness that Eleanor feels as they drive through the center. The Blackwood House Museum sits on a hill overlooking the town, set back from the road behind a wrought iron fence. It's exactly as it appears in Phillips's photograph, a large Victorian structure with elaborate trim, a wide porch, and that distinctive attic window at the very top. The only difference is that now it's been carefully restored, its paint fresh, the grounds well maintained. A small sign by the gate announces the hours. Open Tuesday, Saturday, 10 a.m., 4 p.m. Tours on the hour. Today is Wednesday, and it's just past 2 p.m. Perfect timing, James says as they park. We can join the next tour, get a look inside. Eleanor nods, though she feels a growing reluctance to enter the house. She's being ridiculous, she tells herself. She's a historian, an academic. She doesn't believe in ghosts or thin places or any of the superstitions that consumed Herbert Phillips in his grief. And yet, as they approach the house, she can't shake the feeling that they're being watched from above, from a small window at the very top of the house. The tour group is small, just Eleanor, James, and an elderly couple who seem more interested in the architectural details than the history. Their guide is a young woman named Sarah, a a local college student who recites the house's history with well-rehearsed precision. The Blackwood family was prominent in Arkham society throughout the 19th century, Sarah explains, as she leads them through the ornate entrance hall. Captain Thaddeus Blackwood built this house after retiring from the sea. He lived here with his wife Constance and their 7 children, though only 3 survived to adulthood. The interior is impressive: high ceilings, hardwood floors, period furniture carefully arranged to recreate the atmosphere of a prosperous Victorian household. But Eleanor finds herself struggling to focus on Sarah's narration. There's a heaviness to the air inside, a stillness that feels oppressive. James seems to feel it too. He stays close to Eleanor, his usual enthusiasm dampened. As they move from room to room, he whispers, "Do you notice anything strange about the tour?" Eleanor does. Sarah hasn't mentioned any of the rumors that Phillips documented. Nothing about strange practices or disappearing servants. Nothing about children playing unusual games or a pale woman in the attic. It's a sanitized version of the house's history, focusing on furniture styles and renovation efforts. When they reach the 2nd floor, Eleanor interrupts the tour. Was there ever a photographer named Herbert Phillips who visited the house? Around 1907? Sarah pauses, seeming caught off guard. "I'm not familiar with that name," she says after a moment, "but our archives might have record of him." The Historical Society keeps detailed visitor logs. "What about the attic?" James asks. "Is that part of the tour?" A shadow crosses Sarah's face. "I'm afraid the attic isn't open to the public. It's used for storage and hasn't been restored to period accuracy." The elderly couple exchange glances, clearly annoyed at the interruption. Sarah quickly resumes her script, leading them into what was once the master bedroom. But Eleanor's attention is now fixed on the ceiling, where a small trapdoor presumably leads to the attic above. The tour concludes in the side yard, the very spot where Phillips photographed the 5 children in their circle. From this angle, Eleanor can see the attic window clearly. It's small but distinct, the glass reflecting the afternoon sun. As Sarah makes her closing remarks and the elderly couple wander toward the gift shop, Eleanor approaches their guide. "I'm Professor Eleanor Morgan from the university," she says, showing her faculty ID. "We're researching Herbert Phillips, a photographer who visited this house in 1907. It's for an upcoming exhibition. Would it be possible to speak with someone from the Historical Society? Perhaps to see the archives?" Sarah hesitates, then nods. "Mrs. Winters is here today. She's the society president and knows more about the house's history than anyone. Let me see if she's available." As Sarah disappears into the house, James moves closer to Eleanor. "We need to see that attic," he murmurs. "I know, but let's try the official channels first." They wait in the side yard, the same space where 5 children once stood in a circle, arms outstretched toward something only they could see. Eleanor finds herself scanning the ground, half expecting to find some mark or sign of that circle still visible after all these years. The sun slips behind a cloud, casting the yard into sudden shadow. In that moment, Eleanor feels it, a distinct sensation of being watched. She looks up at the attic window and freezes. For just an instant, she sees a pale face pressed against the glass, its features indistinct except for 2 dark hollows where eyes should be. Then the sun emerges again, and there's nothing there but reflection. "Did you see that?" she whispers to James. But before he can answer, the back door opens and Sarah returns, accompanied by an elderly woman with steel-gray hair and the brisk manner of someone who has spent a lifetime in charge. "Professor Morgan? I'm Harriet Winters. Sarah tells me you're researching Herbert Phillips." Eleanor composes herself, pushing the image of the face at the window to the back of her mind. "Yes, the university recently acquired his photographic collection. We've found evidence that he visited the Blackwood house in August 1907. We're hoping to learn more about that visit." Mrs. Winters' expression is carefully neutral, but Eleanor senses a wariness behind her polite smile. "How interesting. Why don't we talk in my office? It's in the carriage house behind the main building." As they follow Mrs. Winters across the lawn, Eleanor glances back at the house. The attic window stares down at them like a watchful eye, empty now, reflecting only sky. Mrs. Winters' office is cluttered but organized, every surface covered with books, folders, and artifacts relating to Arkham's history. She gestures for Eleanor and James to sit in the 2 chairs facing her desk, while she settles behind it. "Now then," she says, folding her hands on the desk. "Herbert Phillips. Not a name I've heard before, I must admit. You say he visited in 1907? Eleanor removes a copy of the enhanced photograph from her bag, placing it on the desk between them. "Yes. He took this photograph during his visit. Mrs. Winters puts on reading glasses and examines the image. For a moment, her composed demeanor slips. Her hand, reaching for the photograph, trembles slightly. "Where did you get this?" she asks, her voice suddenly tight. "As I mentioned, the university acquired Phillips's collection last month. This was among the photographs." Mrs. Winters studies the image for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "And what exactly is your interest in this?" "In Phillips?" Eleanor explains their research, the discovery of Phillips' journals, his obsession with thin places after his daughter's death. As she speaks, she watches Mrs. Winters's face, noting the subtle changes in her expression, the tightening around her eyes, the slight downturn of her mouth. When Eleanor mentions the children's circle and the white lady in the attic, Mrs. Winters abruptly stands. "I'm afraid I can't help you," she says, removing her glasses. "There's no record of a Herbert Phillips visiting the Blackwood house. And these stories about children's games and attic ghosts, pure fabrication. The Blackwood family was respected in this community. I won't have their memory tarnished by sensationalism." "Mrs. Winters," James interjects, "we're not trying to sensationalize anything. We're historians, interested in documenting." "I know exactly what you're interested in." Mrs. Winters cuts him off. "You're like all the others who come here looking for ghosts and ghouls. Well, there are none. The Blackwood house is a historical landmark, nothing more." Eleanor is taken aback by the vehemence of the woman's response. "Others? Has someone else been asking about this?" Mrs. Winters seems to realize she's said too much. She composes herself with visible effort. "From time to time we get enthusiasts, people who've heard rumors. I assure you, there's nothing to find." She picks up the photograph and hands it back to Eleanor. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to attend to. Sarah can show you out." As they rise to leave, Eleanor notices a framed photograph on the wall behind Mrs. Winters' desk. It shows a group of people standing on the Blackwood house porch, dated 1905. And there, among the adults, is a young girl who looks strikingly like Mrs. Winters herself, perhaps 8 or 9 years old. "Is that you?" Eleanor asks, pointing to the photograph. Mrs. Winters doesn't turn to look. "My grandmother," she says shortly. "Now, good day, Professor Morgan." Outside, in the fading afternoon light, Eleanor and James walk slowly back to their car. "She knows something," James says. "Did you see her reaction to the photograph?" Eleanor nods. "And that wasn't her grandmother in that picture. The clothing style was right for 1905, and the age would be right for Mrs. Winters as a child. She grew up here, James. She might have known those children in Philip's photograph. So what now? We came all this way, and she's effectively thrown us out." Eleanor looks back at the Blackwood house, at the attic window now darkening as the sun sets. "We're not leaving," she says. "Not yet. We're going to wait until the museum closes, and then we're going to find a way into that attic." James stares at her. "Are you serious? That's breaking and entering." "Not if we stay after our tour and hide somewhere until closing. Then it's just unauthorized exploration." Eleanor knows it's a weak justification, but something drives her forward, a need to understand what happened in that house, what Philip saw or thought he saw. "This isn't like you," James says, studying her face. "I know." Eleanor can't explain the compulsion she feels, the certainty that answers lie within that house, within that attic. "You don't have to come. I can do this alone." But James shakes his head. "No way. If you're doing this, I'm coming too. Someone has to be the voice of reason when you're arrested for trespassing." They wait in their car, parked down the street with a clear view of the museum entrance. At 4 p.m., they watch the elderly couple from their tour group leave. At 4:30, Sarah and another young woman, presumably another guide, exit and lock the front door. "There's still Mrs. Winters," James points out. But at 5:15, they see her emerge from the carriage house, lock it, and drive away in an aging Volvo. "Now or never," Eleanor says, opening her car door. The sun is setting as they approach the house, casting long shadows across the lawn. Eleanor leads them not to the front entrance, which will surely be alarmed, but to the back of the house, where a kitchen door opens onto a small herb garden. "How exactly are we planning to get in?" James whispers. Eleanor produces a small case from her bag. "Lockpicks," she says, noting James's shocked expression. "I took a class in historical lock mechanisms for my research on Victorian security systems. Never thought I'd use it for actual breaking and entering." "This is insane," James mutters, but he keeps watch while Eleanor works on the lock. An original from the house's construction, simple compared to modern systems. It takes longer than it would in a movie, but eventually there's a satisfying click, and the door swings open. They slip inside, finding themselves in the museum's recreated kitchen, now dark and silent. The attic access was in the second-floor hallway, Eleanor whispers. A trapdoor in the ceiling. They move through the house carefully, using the flashlights on their phones for illumination. In the darkness, the period furniture casts strange shadows, and every creak of the old floorboards sounds thunderous in the silence. They find the trapdoor exactly where Eleanor remembered it, at the end of the upstairs hallway. A rope pull hangs from its center, just out of reach. "Give me a boost," Eleanor says. James interlaces his fingers, creating a step for her. As Eleanor rises, she grasps the rope and pulls. The trapdoor opens with a groan of old hinges, releasing a wooden ladder that unfolds to the floor. A draft of cold air flows down from the opening, carrying a musty smell of old wood and dust. Eleanor shines her light upward, revealing a dark space beyond. "I'll go first," she says, placing her foot on the bottom rung. The ladder creaks under her weight, but holds. As she climbs, Eleanor feels a growing sense of dread, a certainty that something waits above. But she continues upward, emerging into the attic space. Her flashlight beam cuts through the darkness, revealing a large open room with sloped ceilings. It's not being used for storage as Sarah claimed. In fact, it's almost entirely empty, except for a single chair placed directly beneath the small window that overlooks the yard. "James," she calls softly. "Come up. You need to see this." James climbs the ladder and stands beside her, his own light joining hers to illuminate the space. "It's empty," he says. "Why would they lie about using it for storage?" Eleanor moves forward, her light sweeping the bare wooden floors. There's a strange pattern visible in the dust. A large circle approximately 10 feet in diameter, with smaller circles arranged around its perimeter. "Look," she whispers. "The circle." James kneels beside one of the smaller circles, examining it closely. "These aren't dust patterns," he says. "They're carved into the floor, shallow but definite." Eleanor continues to explore, her light revealing more details. The walls, initially appearing blank, are covered with faint markings, symbols similar to the one found on the envelope containing Philip's photograph. A circle bisected by a vertical line, repeated dozens of times. She approaches the chair beneath the window. It's old, possibly original to the house, with a high back and worn upholstery, positioned exactly where someone would sit to look down at the yard below, at the spot where the children formed their circle. Eleanor shines her light on the windowsill and freezes. There, scratched into the wood, is a name: Emily. "James," she calls, her voice barely audible. "Philip's daughter. Her name was Emily." James joins her at the window, his flashlight illuminating the scratched name. "Could be a coincidence," he says, but his voice lacks conviction. Eleanor shakes her head. Phillips wrote in his journal, "Emily was right about the circle." What if he wasn't referring to his daughter? What if he meant someone else named Emily? Someone connected to this house? She turns, scanning the attic again. Something about the space feels wrong. The proportions, the angles. The attic should extend over the entire house, but this room covers only about half the area it should. "There's another space," she says, moving her light along the far wall. "Another room beyond this one." They search the wall carefully, looking for a door or access panel. It's James who finds it, a section of the wainscoting that moves slightly when pressed. With careful pressure, it swings open, revealing a narrow doorway. Beyond lies a second attic room, smaller than the first and utterly dark. As their lights penetrate the space, both Eleanor and James gasp. The walls are covered with photographs, hundreds of them, yellowed with age but carefully preserved, attached directly to the wooden beams. And every single photograph shows the same thing: children standing in a circle in the yard below, their arms outstretched. "My God," James whispers. Phillips wasn't the first. Eleanor moves into the room, examining the photographs. They span decades, based on the clothing styles, from the 1860s through the early 1900s. Different children in each image, but always the same formation, always in the same location. And in every photograph, visible in the attic window, is a white, indistinct shape. At the center of the room stands a small table. On it rests a leather-bound book, open to a page covered in faded handwriting. Eleanor approaches cautiously, shining her light on the text. "August 17th, 1907, she reads aloud. "Mr. Phillips has joined us today. He understands now. He sees what we have always seen. The circle is complete once more." James looks over her shoulder at the page. "That's the day Phillips died." Eleanor turns the page, but the rest of the book is empty. She flips back, finding entry after entry, all in the same careful handwriting. dating back to 1864. Each describes children gathering in the yard, forming their circle. Each mentions she or her teaching them, guiding them. She grows stronger with each circle. Eleanor reads from an entry dated 1882. Soon she will be able to cross over completely. We must be patient. We must be precise. A sudden chill fills the room, more intense than before. Eleanor's flashlight flickers, then stabilizes. We need to go, James says urgently. Now. But Eleanor can't tear herself away from the book. She turns to the very first entry, dated March 15, 1864. Today I made a discovery in the East Indies, she reads. A method of transcendence, of passing between worlds. Captain Blackwood laughs at my interest in native superstitions, but I have seen the truth with my own eyes. I have seen what waits on the other side of the veil. The entry is signed simply, Emily Blackwood, Thaddeus Blackwood's wife, James says. Not Constance. That must have been his second wife. History got it wrong. Or it was deliberately changed, Eleanor finishes. Mrs. Winters said the Historical Society wouldn't have the Blackwood name tarnished. They've been covering this up for generations. The temperature in the room plummets suddenly. Eleanor's breath forms clouds in the air, and her flashlight dims, the battery draining rapidly despite being fully charged. We need to leave, James insists, pulling at her arm. Right now. This time, Eleanor doesn't resist. They back out of the small room, closing the hidden door behind them. As they turn toward the ladder, Eleanor's failing flashlight sweeps across the attic window. A face stares back at them. Not a reflection, but a face on the other side of the glass, looking in. A woman's face, pale as bone, with hollow eyes and hair so light it's almost white. She presses a skeletal hand against the glass, her mouth opening in what might be a smile or a scream. James sees it too. He grabs Eleanor's arm, pulling her toward the ladder. Go! He shouts, abandoning any pretense of stealth. They scramble down the ladder, Eleanor first, then James. As they reach the hallway, a loud crack sounds from above, the trap door slamming shut with such force that dust showers down from the ceiling. They run through the darkened house, navigating by memory and the fading light of their phones. Behind them, footsteps sound on the upper floor. Slow, deliberate steps that shouldn't be possible in an empty building. They burst out through the kitchen door into the night air, not stopping until they reach their car. Eleanor's hands shake so badly she can't find her keys. I'll drive, James says, taking them from her. As they pull away from the curb, Eleanor looks back at the Blackwood house. In the attic window, clearly visible against the darkness, stands a tall, thin figure in white. Even from this distance, Eleanor can feel its gaze following them as they drive away. The university campus is quiet when they return, well past midnight. Neither spoke much during the drive back, both trying to process what they'd seen, what they'd learned. We should go home, James says as they park near the history department. Get some rest. Look at this with fresh eyes tomorrow. But Eleanor shakes her head. I need to see the photograph again. The original. They enter the building using Eleanor's faculty key card, making their way to her office. The corridors are dark and silent, their footsteps echoing on the tiled floors. Eleanor unlocks her office door, switching on the desk lamp. The warm glow is reassuring after the darkness of the Blackwood attic. She goes straight to her drawer, where she left the original photograph locked away. But when she opens the drawer, the protective sleeve is empty. It's gone, she says, turning to James. The photograph is gone. James frowns. Could you have moved it? Left it in the lab with Dr. Michaels? No, I put it right here before we left. Eleanor searches the drawer again, then the surrounding drawers, then her entire desk. The photograph has vanished. She sinks into her chair, a terrible suspicion forming. Check my computer, she says to James. The digital scan we made. See if it's still there. James wakes her computer and navigates to the folder where they saved the enhanced images. It too is empty. This isn't possible, he says. Even if someone deleted the files from your computer, they should still be on the department server, and in Dr. Michaels's lab system. Eleanor stares at the empty screen, then at the empty drawer. We need to call Dr. Michaels. But when they try, the call goes straight to voicemail. It's after 1 a.m. Of course he isn't answering. Tomorrow, James says. We'll sort this out tomorrow. The images can't just disappear from multiple systems. Eleanor nods, but a sense of dread fills her. You should go home, get some rest, she tells James. I'm going to stay here a while, try to make sense of my notes. James hesitates. I don't think you should be alone after what we saw. I'll be fine, she assures him. The building has security, and I need some time to think. After James reluctantly leaves, Eleanor sits in the silence of her office, staring at the empty drawer. The photograph is gone. The digital copies are gone. All physical evidence of what they discovered has vanished. But she remembers. She remembers the attic with its circle carved into the floor, the hidden room filled with photographs spanning decades, the book with its entries about crossing over, and she remembers the face at the window, the same face that appeared in Phillips's photograph a century ago. Her phone rings, startling her. Unknown number. "Professor Morgan," she answers. "You went into the attic." The voice is female, elderly. "Mrs. Winters, you shouldn't have done that." Eleanor sits up straight. "How did you know? How did you get this number? You don't understand what you're interfering with," Mrs. Winters continues, ignoring her questions. "What started in 1864 cannot be stopped. The circle must be maintained." "What circle? What is happening in that house?" A long pause. Then, Emily found a doorway. Not a physical door, a threshold between worlds. She learned how to open it, but not how to close it. What came through has been there ever since. Contained, but growing stronger. The circles help to maintain the boundary, to keep it from crossing over completely. "The children," Eleanor says. "Why children? They can see it. They can sense the threshold. Adults lose that ability." Mrs. Winters' voice grows softer. "I was one of them in 1907, one of the children in Phillips's photograph. I stood in the circle with the others. I saw what waited in the attic." Eleanor thinks of the girl in the photograph on Mrs. Winters' wall. Not her grandmother, but herself as a child. "What happened to Phillips?" she asks. "He came looking for his daughter. He thought the doorway might lead to wherever the dead go. He was partly right." Mrs. Winters sighs, a sound of ancient weariness. "He saw something in the attic, something that wore his daughter's face, but wasn't her. It promised him answers, reunion. He joined it, willingly. And the photographs? My copy is missing. They always return to the house," Mrs. Winters says. "Every image of the circle of what waits in the attic, they're drawn back. By morning, you'll find that your notes about Phillips will be gone too. Your memories will fade. You'll forget what you saw." "That's not possible," Eleanor insists. "It's happened before, to others who came too close. The town protects its secrets, Professor. The Blackwood house protects what it contains. Why are you telling me this if I'm going to forget?" A long pause. "Because I'm tired," Mrs. Winters finally says. "I've maintained the circle for 70 years, found the children, taught them the game, kept the boundary intact. But I'm old now. Someone must continue after I'm gone." Eleanor feels a chill that has nothing to do with the temperature. "You want me to take your place? You've seen it. You've felt its pull. You'll come back to Arkham, Professor Morgan. You'll help maintain the circle. You'll understand that it's necessary. And if I don't, then it will find another way. It's patient. It's been waiting since 1864. It can wait a little longer." The line goes dead. Eleanor stares at her phone, her mind racing. It's absurd, impossible. A town-wide conspiracy to contain some supernatural entity? A force that can erase photographs and alter memories? It can't be real. And yet she remembers the face at the window, the impossible cold of the attic, the hundreds of photographs spanning decades, all showing the same circle of children, the same presence watching from above. Her computer chimes. An email notification. It's from Dr. Michaels. "Professor Morgan, I've reviewed the Phillips photograph as requested, but found no anomalies or areas requiring enhancement. It appears to be a standard documentary image of children at play, circa 1907. If you need further analysis, please let me know. Regards, Dr. Michaels." Attached is a JPEG of the photograph, but it's wrong. The children aren't standing in a circle with arms outstretched. They're simply playing on a lawn, arranged in no particular pattern. The attic window is empty. There is no figure of Phillips hanging in the background. It's the same photograph, but everything they discovered has been erased. Eleanor stares at the image, a sense of unreality washing over her. She begins to doubt her own memories. Did they really see what they thought they saw? Did they really find a hidden room filled with photographs? Did a face really appear at the window? Her phone chimes with a text from James. "Just got home, thinking about what we saw today at the Blackwood house. The architecture was fascinating. Too bad the attic was closed for renovations. Maybe next time?" Eleanor reads the message twice, her hands beginning to shake. James doesn't remember. The attic, the circle, the face at the window, all gone from his memory, replaced with a mundane tour of a historical home. She begins to type a response, to remind him of what they discovered. But as she forms the words, she finds them slipping away. What exactly did they see in the attic? There was something important, something about circles and a woman in white, but the details are blurring, fading like an old photograph left in the sun. By morning, Eleanor will remember visiting the Blackwood house. She'll remember meeting Mrs. Winters and being interested in Herbert Phillips' photography. But the circle of children, the face at the window, the hidden room in the attic, these will be gone, replaced by ordinary memories of an ordinary day. And in a few weeks she'll find herself drawn back to Arkham, to the Blackwood house, to the attic where something waits, growing stronger with each passing year, with each new circle of children who stand in the yard below, arms outstretched toward invisible distortions in the air. The circle must be maintained. The boundary must hold. What began in 1864 continues, unseen by most, but ever present. A secret passed down through generations in a small New England town, preserved in photographs that always find their way home. And in the attic window of the Blackwood house, a pale face watches and waits. Patient, eternal, almost, but not quite, complete.